So what I have shown you now is two elements. One is I told you how temples came into being. Then I told you how the structure of the temples started. Then I told you how Cholas built temples and how they used it to even administer local villages and so on. Now we will move to the last element of temples, which is actually about temple festivals. So for that, we will look at the Pandya temples. I'm not going to spend too much time on their history. They were one of the three crowned rulers of Dravida Nadu. They were the smallest, among the three probably that I mentioned. Even though they went up to Sri Lanka, captured and all that, they were hardly ever a huge power. They always kept waxing and waning. But they are a very significant temple when it comes to Tamil literature, because there is something called the Sangam period of Tamil history. Sangam is actually, a gathering. Sangam, as the word means, a gathering. Literary gatherings took place at the time of Pandyas, and a lot of literature, ancient literature, was written during these times. And that spans, 6th century BCE to 3rd century CE. Their golden period, though, was probably from 13th to 14th century CE under two kings called Jatavarma Pandya and Maravarma Pandya. But we won't go too much into their history. I just want to now go to temple as social elements. What you see here is again another very, very significant temple. This is the Chidambaram temple. This is where Lord Shiva is supposed to have come and danced his Tandava dance for two sages, Patanjali and Vyagrapada. There is no linga here. There is actually an open air shrine. Shiva is supposed to be there as Akasha Linga. I told you that temples were actually locations where some significant event had taken place. Lord Shiva coming and dancing in this place itself is a significant event. There is nothing more needed to further represent the Lord there. It is just Akasha Linga. Since he came and danced here in this temple, and this is a very renowned and famous temple, a lot of dance performances happen here in this temple. When I visited this temple, there was actually a dance going on. Again, I'll show you one more video for you to understand how these temples became part and parcel of the society, and how society actually used these temples to further art forms of various kinds. Sorry for the poor quality of the video. This is actually a dance performance where some school of dance has actually come and said, I want to perform in the temple, and they provided the space and they performed a dance right there. So the temple encourages a lot of artists to come and perform their dances. Temples also have utsavas, as I told you earlier. So actually, I should continue sharing that. So when utsavas happen, and utsavas are of various kinds. Okay, so Some span over a month, 15 days to a month. Some are specific events on particular days of a year that happen. Some temples have multiple utsavas, some have one or two utsavas. But it's a time when everybody and anybody around in that community, in that village, in that town comes to the temple, and I'll show you how awesome and huge it becomes. In fact, I just want to show you one quick video.
Bharji, you're not sharing. Bharji, you're not sharing screen.
Yeah, I will share it. I will share it. Even smallest temples have it. So when we went, as you can see, I was there in Chidambaram in the evening, and then I wanted to go to another temple, which is called Tiruvidai Marudur Mahalinga Swami Temple. On the way, we were driving there, okay? And suddenly we see thousands of people walking on the road. And we had no idea what was going on. So we asked somebody at a tea stall, what was going on. He said, somewhere in the hills near the Chidambaram temple, there is a Murugan temple. The place is called Tiruvidaikali. You don't need to remember it. But there is a Murugan temple there, and they have to reach there by morning because the Utsavam is starting. I will show you a video of what we saw on the roads. Let me just share my screen with you. So ignore the music, we are listening to some Ramayana. These are all people walking to some hill, a small temple for Murugan. They all pray to him. They are very dedicated to him. So all of them are walking. Several of them just swinging their hands are walking. Some of them are taking some prasadam or something else on their head, as you can see. As we keep moving on, you will see a lot more people. All of these, everyone who's walking is going to the temple. And you can see all of them are walking barefoot. You have to go barefoot to the temple. You can't have anything on your feet because you're going on a holy journey. Anybody that you see walking here with a barefoot is actually heading to the temple. I am showing you about a minute and a half video. By now we would have seen at least 60, 70 people. This went on for about 25-30 minutes. We estimated somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 people were going to the temple. And it's an unknown temple. Nobody knows it apart from the local community. Only they know it. And they pray to it. Right? It's a rather unique thing that you can see. And this happens with every temple in Tamil Nadu. Small, large, doesn't matter. All of these temples have a Utsava going on. And all of these temples have the Utsava actually making sure that the entire community is involved. And hey, wait, where did this go? Share.
Sir, was this in the night? Were the people?
Yeah, it was in the night. This was around 8 p.m. in the night, 8 or 9 p.m. in the night. And here you can see I actually took a picture of some of them carrying what is called a kavadi. It's kind of a semicircular structure that they take in prayer to the Lord, to Murugan. Murugan, who is a form of Subramanya, son of Shiva.
But the temples were that big to hold 2,000 people?
They will stand outside. I will show you some videos that are going to blow your mind. Just hold on. I'm coming to them. It's not a very huge temple. So there will be a reasonably large field outside the temple where they will plonk themselves and go to the temple, pray, hold dances, hold cultural events, pray to the Lord, dedicate all those, whatever they do to the Lord, seek his blessings and go back. And as you can see, they're all walking bare feet. There are some rules that they follow. Just like, when you look at people going to Sabarimala, there is a rule they follow. You may have seen some Sabarimala devotees, right? So what we'll do is go to a much larger temple, the Meenakshi Amman temple. Here it is Amman who rules the town. Madurai Meenakshi Amman temple is a very, very famous temple. Parvati is here in the form, or Shakti is here in the form of Meenakshi. Meenakshi literally means the lady with the fish shaped eyes. She is supposed to have very beautiful eyes. The story goes that she was born to the Pandya king. She went on to conquer the entire world. Then she went to the footsteps of Kailasha, saying, I'll conquer Kailasha as well. She saw Shiva, fell in love with him, and they both got married. So the marriage of Shiva, and Shiva is called Sundareshwarar here. Sundara means obviously, handsome or beautiful. So Shiva is considered as a very handsome deity. So Shiva and Meenakshi get married. So every year in Chittirai is the first month of the Tamil New Year. Usually it's from mid-April to mid-May. Obviously it didn't happen this year because of the problem that we are all going through. A 15-day long festival happens where it starts with the raising of the flag on the flagpole. Every day Meenakshi goes out on the streets in a ratha. She's carried around, Shiva is carried around, and then she's crowned the queen of the world because she's conquered all those kingdoms. And then finally she marries Shiva. A few kilometers or a few miles away, there is another Vishnu temple. It is called Kallalagar. Alagar again means somebody who's very pretty or beautiful. Kalla, for those who speak Tamil and Kannada, Kalla means thief. Of course, it doesn't mean he's a thief. Well, it also means he's a thief, but it also means one who steals your heart when you take a look at him because he's so beautiful. So there is a Vishnu temple a few miles away. Vishnu is considered the brother of Meenakshi. During this festival, he's also sent an invitation. And the local story goes that he brings a lot of gifts. And suddenly he's very scared that he will be robbed on the way. So he takes a very circuitous route. And there is a river called Vaigai, which actually flows through Madurai. And then he just comes towards Vaigai and he gets the information that they're already married and he's too late. So he gets very angry. He gets into the river and he says, I'm not going to budge from here. So then Meenakshi and Sundareshwarar actually come to him at the river, take the gifts that he has brought and go back to the temple. Kallalagar now goes back to his temple and a celebration and a festival continues there for 15 days. So Madurai is like agog for 30 days, the entire month of Chittirai. And this is at a time when summer is at its peak in India. And that's 38, 39 degrees Celsius. What does that translate to, Sarvesh ji?
About
degrees,
95. Yeah,
95 to 100 degrees.
Yeah.
It's that hot. It's blazing hot. They're all out in the sun. And, this is the Kallalagar temple. One of the gopurams of the temple. You also see like huge swords here. He's guarded by a local deity called Karupanna Swami. So it's a mixture of local deities and the super deities that we have. So Karupanna Swami, who's his guardian, actually is so huge that he needs to carry a sword that is this big. They even put those swords on display. So this is how the Meenakshi Amman flag is hoisted. She's taken out on different kinds of vahanas. This one is obviously Nandi because you're seeing a bull here. One day she'll be taken out on Nandi, one day she'll be taken out on a horse, one day she'll be taken out on a chariot, so on and so forth. Children dress up for the event. It's a cult event. Everybody comes together. Kids dress up as Meenakshi, as Ambal, as one of the deities. Right? You have her getting crowned here because she's become now the queen of the world. And here starts, the journey of Vishnu from the other side. He's on his horse and he's hurriedly coming to the marriage. And finally he gets into the water and you can see, people going berserk in the water, in the Vaigai river, splashing about because he's entered and he's angry and he's waiting for Shiva and Parvati to come. I'll show you a couple of videos, and I think with this, more or less, we will be done with our presentation for the day. So let me share my screen quickly. So here you go. Look at that. Somewhere at one end of the street is Meenakshi, I don't know where, but she's being brought to the streets of Madurai. Right? One more. And finally, the video of what happens in the river. Yeah, so let's kind of come back to some closing comments that I have. And also a task that I would give you, if you had found this entire presentation interesting, I think you'll be quite interested in doing that task and probably talking to your parents and elders about it. So, right. So, that's how the community comes together. And everything that you saw there, from construction of the rathas to, the entire town of Madurai, and Madurai is a fairly large town, entire town is out on the streets, celebrating their deity, celebrating their gods, celebrating the marriage of Meenakshi and Sundareshwarar. And at the same time, bringing Kallalagar. It's a story that's been told 100 times, right? But it's done every year, year on year, without fail, with the same fervor, because it's a great event in the lives of those people. It's a time when everybody comes together, children, parents, elders, they all come out and celebrate. So it's a very important event, right? So I want to kind of complete my talk by saying, what did we go through here? Places to worship our gods have always been part of our culture, be it tirtha sthalas or temples that got constructed later. We were a very meticulous civilization. We built methods to construct our temple. We evolved it as a science and an art. And we brought temples into every aspect of our life. It was administrative, it was economic, arts developed. And finally, the local society itself hinges on the temple. It surrounds the temple. The temple is everything. So this is in brief, and as I told you, so many temples in Tamil Nadu have shown you, like, if all the temples were a single human body, then I have actually shown you the tip of a fingernail today. That's how much is unexplored yet for you in Tamil Nadu. Now, what I want to do is, I showed you only one example of a Murugan temple where there were people walking to a small temple. We have Kuladevatas, my Kuladevata is also Murugan, a form of Subramanya, in a temple that is kind of 20 miles from Pondicherry, which is a fairly large town. It's called Mailam. It is supposed to be the place where, after Murugan vanquished Surapadman, Surapadman takes the form of a peacock and requests the Lord that he becomes Murugan's Vahana. And that's my Kuladevata. That's the temple that my family and my father, his father, and his fathers have been associated with. So I want you to, if you don't know already, I want you to go and find out who your Kuladevata is. And the next time that you are in India, go and visit the temple. Understand it, because that's part of your family's history. That's part of your ancestry. And I think it's important for you to know where you came from and what you are inheriting as part of being a Hindu. I think with this, I will close my talk, Sarveshji. I hope it was interesting and we can take some questions.
Bharatji, thank you so much. In fact, interesting would be an understatement, because you can see these kids, it's been 2 hours and they want more. So, it has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I have a bunch of questions that kids have sent to me. And
yes, please.
So what I would do, I would go in the chronological order, because that also is topical order. The way you were presenting, they were just chatting in the chat, sending questions to me. So more or less it aligns with that. So first question is from Aditya and Ranjana, related questions. I will club them together.
Yeah.
Who decided what to carve on the walls of the temple? Was it the king, or was it within the team that you mentioned? Or was it based on the god the temple is dedicated to? That's the first one.
So actually a very, very interesting question, very good question. There are some things that are fixed. For example, inside the actual Vimana, the wall of the Vimana, particularly in later temples, what you see is because the earlier temples sometimes just had pillars, they didn't have space for what is to be carved and so on. But in the later temples, there is a position for each deity. I want you to think back to the mandala. I didn't go so detailed into the mandala, but the mandala actually specifies which corner of the square is allocated to which deity. And consequently, that deity's form is usually represented. For example, on the walls of Shiva temple, what you will find is, on the southern wall, it is always Dakshinamurti. Why is it Dakshinamurti? By the name itself, you can find out. Dakshin is south. Dakshinamurti is represented in the south. On one of the other walls, on the west wall, you'll typically find Lingodbhava. The temples are usually east facing. The main sanctum is east facing. And on the west wall, you'll find Lingodbhava. And on the north wall, you'll usually find a Durga, for example. Usually. So there are, because the mandala specifies the way the energy comes in and resides in the deity, these structures already determine which deity is going to be on which wall. On the outer walls, though, there are no such rules or regulations. On the mandapa walls, they typically depict what they want, and usually the king would describe what he wants, or the temple construction team itself would decide what they wanted to build.
Before that, can you just tell me what are the walls again? What all are on the walls?
Can you, Bharatji, he's asking, can you quickly again tell what was on the walls of Mahabalipuram? But I think that's a long answer to that.
What was in the walls of Mahabalipuram? Maybe what I will do is, we could have a separate session on some specific temples and just go into detail on those at a later date, where I show you. So I have myself clicked about 250, 300 pictures, or maybe even 1,000 pictures, right? What I showed you now was some 20, 30 pictures. So I can actually go in more detail someday on each of those temples, or any specific temple that you're interested in, to tell you what all is there. Because as I told you, it's a massive exercise. It's a complex topic. There are so many elements to cover. And the architecture portion itself is something that can be covered for a full day session on these temples.
Easily. And by the way, there are more than one child has asked this question, so I should put that to you about Mahabalipuram complex.
Yeah.
So those Pandava and the Draupadi temples, are they dedicated to the same deity or each one is to a different deity?
So while the Rathas were named after the Pandavas, the actual deity inside is not the Pandavas. Only one of them is actually fully complete, which is the Draupadi Ratha. And inside you actually have a Durga representation, very similar to the Durga I showed you in the Varaha cave temple. So, and Dharmaraja Ratha was supposed to be built for Shiva. There was supposed to be a linga within. They never completed it. I wish they had, because that temple, it is said that Rajaraja actually came, took a look at Dharmaraja Ratha and used it as a template for building his Brihadishwara temple, the huge temple that we saw. The first.
That's very interesting. So, Bharatji, there are more questions. So, Tejas Bhatia is asking, are these temples after the initial construction ever renovated and built over the original? And
beautiful question. So wonderful question. So
he has one. Let me complete. He has one more point so that you can club your answer together. He says, in the modern times, I'm sure the necessities such as the bathrooms and toilets have been added. Do Agamas talk about how to not disturb the original sanctity of the deity while constructing and renovating the temples?
Yeah, so the Agama rules are very clear about what is permitted and what is not permitted within the temple complex. The toilets and other sanitary facilities are actually constructed outside at a reasonable distance rather than inside the temple complex, because there is a level of purity that needs to be maintained. Regarding renovations, so I'll give you an example. There is a temple called, so there are 5 lingas in the south. They're called Pancha Bhuta Stalas. What are bhutas? They're basically 5 elements: air, water, fire, earth, and Akasha. We saw the Chidambaram temple, that's the Akasha Linga, the element associated with Akasha. The element associated with earth is a temple called Ekambareshwarar temple, where actually the lingam is made of mud. They don't do any abhishek on that lingam because it's made of mud, and consequently, you can't pour water or liquids on it. That temple, actually built probably during the Pallava era or probably even earlier, you will see the architectural style change as you move from inside of the temple to outside. And finally, the outermost wall, you will find the royal insignia of the Vijayanagara kings.
Oh, interesting.
Vijayanagara kings had a royal insignia, which was the sun, moon, a sword, and a boar. So on one of the pillars, you will find that insignia. So every subsequent dynasty which took over, inscribed on the temples, added elements. The Brihadishwara temple that you saw was actually taken over later by the Nayakas, the Maratha Empire, one of the Nayaks of the Maratha Empire. And the largest Marathi inscription is actually found in the Tanjavur temple. In terms of what they contributed to the temple, what they contributed to a village outside, which Pathshala they were funding, all those details are put outside. So, yeah, I mean, Ranveer speaks Marathi, very good. So, so your Marathas actually ruled from Tanjavur for some time. And they left a lot of inscriptions there. So, and it's in Marathi, by the way. So if you want to go or you go to that temple, you can see that inscription.
Very interesting, Bharatji.
So the larger point is kingdoms took over these temples and started adding their own elements and expanding the scope of these temples.
So Bharatji, a couple of questions children have asked about the core architectural aspects. Why are the entrances called Gopuram? What is the ritual purpose of the water tanks?
So water tanks basically have the water that is used is sanctified, purified for usage for the deity. From this tank that Abhisheka is performed. it is from this tank that any food preparations that are done also, a lot of the water from these tanks is taken. So these tanks are specifically sanctified so that all of the activities where you need to do cleansing, cleaning, abhishekams are all done with the water from this tank. A lot of these tanks are actually connected to a river through some pipelines. There are even underground canals that you find in some of these tanks. They go to the closest river. Of course, temples which are far away from the river, they make sure that they bring the water and do the necessary ritual to make sure the water is accepted for use within the deity. As far as Gopurams go, Gopuram simply means an entrance. That's all. The word itself means an entrance, and that's why it's called Gopuram. In Tamil, actually, most of the time you'll use Vasal. Vasal is again door or a gateway through which you enter and pass through into the main structure of the temple.
Very good. Very interesting. What about Gopuram? Why is it called Gopuram? One child asked.
So it's a synonym for entrance, as far as I know. And since it's the entrance to the temple, it's called Gopuram. And in Tamil, you usually use Vasal or door through which you enter into the temple complex.
Thank you, Bharatji. So a couple of children have asked a little personal question. They are saying, since you visit so much and you have been to so many temples, 3 questions I'll club into one. Neha, Anag, and one more child has asked. Which is your favorite temple? Why? Which is the most powerful temple in your view? And last one is interesting. If you had the power to go back in time, which ancient North Indian temple, which might not exist anymore, would you like to visit?
So I'll answer the last question. If Bhoja had completed his temple, and I think Sarvesh, you can tell me the name of the temple.
Yeah, it's called Bhojeshwara temple on the outskirts of Bhopal. Yeah.
That he half completed. I think if that temple had fully constructed, it would have been Tanjavur temple actually. It would have been much, much bigger. Go and see Kashi in its oldest form and what structure actually remained. I spoke to you about Agamas. The Agama form of worship is very diligently followed in the south. The rituals that are performed for each deity are very clearly followed from the Agamas. I'm not sure, or I don't know, and probably Sarveshji, you can tell me here, on what ritual structure is actually followed in the northern temples. And it would have been very interesting for me to see if the same form of worship actually existed in Kashi, or was it something different. What is my most favorite temple? I'm a fan of the Pallavas because small kingdom, but they left so much of material for the others to take and build on. In fact, there is a Kailasanatha temple in Ellora also. It's some of you may have seen it. It's actually a rock boulder into which they cut in. The foundation of the temple also was taken from this one. There is a wonderful story about this temple. So Pallavas and Chalukyas were always fighting each other. They were perennially at war with each other. They were like favorite rivals. So Vikramaditya defeats the then Pallava king. I don't remember the name. He comes to Kanchi with a single focused mind that he's going to destroy that city. He will take revenge for all the fights that have happened between these two kingdoms, and he will end that city once and for all. He enters Kailasanatha temple. He sees all the smiling faces of Shiva, completely falls in love with the temple, leaves Kanchi alone, goes back and constructs a Virupaksha temple based on this temple. So to me, Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram is my favorite. The dancing Shiva that we saw there is probably my favorite representation of Shiva. and it's a very special temple for me. What was the third question?
I think you answered that. The third question
Okay.
was, which one is the most powerful temple? But I think you kind of answered that.
Yeah, powerful. I don't know.
So
If you're a Shaiva, it is Kashi. If you're a Vaishnava, it is Srirangam.
So I'll jump the topic. There are about 5 or 6 questions about this north-south thing,
Yeah.
Bharatji. So I'll just club them together. So can the temple architecture of North India be revived along the lines of Dravid temples? That's first question. I have heard that there are some South Indian priests in some famous North Indian temples and vice versa. Is it true? Third,
Yeah.
the video you have shown of the Kumara devotees at night with Kavada,
Yeah.
I have seen similar scenes in North Indian temples also. Are they the same?
Yeah.
And okay, I will keep those. Other two are very similar to these.
Okay, so we have each one has its own version of going to their own Lord, and there are festival around it. Obviously, you have the Kavariyas walking up. I don't remember the timeline, but that's obviously happens in the north. It's very similar to what happens. So it is a age-old tradition. In fact, if you go to Tiruvannamalai, every Purnima and the full moon is out, there is a circumambulatory path around the hill. The hill is actually, that is, I told you about the Panchabhuta Stalas, that is the Agni Stala. That it is said that is where Shiva appeared as a pillar of fire. So people circumambulate it every Paurnami. They go and go around the temple. It usually starts in the evening, and through the night they walk around the hill. So this has always been a part of what we do, whether north or south. Regarding a revival of northern architecture, we're seeing one already. I mean, the Nagara style is coming up in Ayodhya now. The Ayodhya temple is going to be very distinctly Nagara style. So the point is, in Tamil Nadu, our life is very revolved around the temple. I am not sure that element is still there in the north for it to undergo such a revival. I would say, citizens who are concerned about it should definitely come together. There is land. I mean, a lot of governments, at least currently, the governments that are there will be able to provide you what you need for you to go ahead and build. We desperately should, because we can't lose that style. That style is another phenomenal style. I've been to Odisha, where I've seen the Odia Konark style of Nagara architecture. I've been to the Puri temple, and it's another very superb representation for installing our deities. So I don't think we should lose it. How we revive it, I don't know. I don't have a perspective on it, but it's something to definitely think about.
Okay.
What it
No, I think you covered the other. I think you covered. There was only one thing, that is it true that there are some South Indian priests in famous North Indian temples and vice versa?
Yeah, there are. I think a lot of priests go from here to Badri, to Kedarnath. Some Kerala priests go even to some of your northern temples.
Even Pashupatinath in Nepal, I heard, Bharatji.
Pashupatinath has people going from the south.
Yeah.
It is to do with who was traditionally appointed to take care of the temple, and that lineage kind of continues and takes over. At the end of the day, one of the significant philosophies that spread all over India was actually started by Shankaracharya, who started all the way from south in Kerala and went all the way to Kashmir and came back and went again, and so on. So obviously there is a lot of cross mixing of these people, and the underlying fabric or the underlying religion is the same. There is no difference.
Thank you, Bharatji. So
There
there
is
is,
elemental differences, but
which are natural. So there is a googly from a child, from a student.
yeah.
He's asking, why do we see Taj Mahal advertised so much and not one of these beautiful temples you showed?
भाई अब वो तो that's a lot to do with the politics, and that's probably another 2-hour lecture, and I can bring way more accomplished people who can talk hours and hours on why we have reached the state that we have reached. Obviously, it shouldn't be Taj Mahal. It should be Kashi, Mathura, Ayodhya. And I'm glad the temple is coming up in Ayodhya, because Ayodhya is going to transform. People who come from outside are going to flock to Ayodhya. It's going to be a transformational temple that is getting built. It's a very important temple for us. And over time, let us see, we will change the symbol from Taj Mahal to whatever. Why a tomb when we can have a sacred structure representing us?
Well said, Bharatji. So we may have time just for picking up couple of questions. I can send rest of the questions to you, Bharatji, over email.
Sure.
And I will share the answer. But let me just choose at my discretion.
So
couple of questions.
I actually have a problem now. The problem that I have is tomorrow I'm talking to a Chennai school on the same talk, but I have 1 hour. So I realize I have to now go back, take a look at it, and see how much I can put in and how much I need to leave out.
That's
Because
a good
it's gone on
problem.
for 2 hours. I was also
rehearsal
lost
today.
in it that I went on and on.
So I have two more questions, which I think with that we can conclude. One is, have you been to some of the temples we have in America, and do you think those are as genuine as the temples you have shown?
No, I haven't. Or have I? No, I haven't. I've been to the US a few times, but unfortunately never been to, I don't know, Pittsburgh or wherever you have the temples, even the ones in Texas. Well, as long as it was installed in the right way, I see no reason why they can't be as holy, as divine as you want them to be. And I would assume that enough care was taken to install the temple in the right manner. And who knows, 1,000 years down the line, somebody will be pointing at that temple and saying, the Indians who came here built it. And it's a very powerful temple.
I agree with you completely on that.
Yeah.
So from the list of questions I have, let me ask the last one, which is somewhat interesting. So one student is asking, I am from Maharashtra. I have never been to Tamil Nadu. Next time when I visit India, I wish my parents will take me to the temples of Tamil Nadu. If I can visit only one city, which place would you advise that I go to?
Go to Tanjavur, Kumbakonam. That belt is simply awesome. There are temples at every street corner. If you trip and fall, you'll fall into a temple compound. So go to Kumbakonam and Tanjavur. There are very ancient temples. As I told you, I covered very few. At land which has 35,000 temples registered, is government statistics. So I don't know how many more smaller temples are there. So, and with many ancient temples, that whole belt of Kumbakonam and Tanjavur, and those two cities are, kind of stone's throw away, a few miles apart from each other. There are a lot of ancient temples there, both Shaiva temples and Vaishnava temples. It has.
I have a question.
It has actually, Kumbakonam actually has in the temple where we also went. Okay, so there is a Vishnu temple there, which is actually called the elder brother of Tirupati Balaji. You're supposed to visit that temple before you go to Uppiliyappan Kovil. Uppiliyappan Kovil. The name itself means the Lord who doesn't eat salt. And there is a backstory behind it and all that. So there are very ancient temples. Go to Kumbakonam and Tanjavur. They're very close by, and I think you'll have a great time.
Okay, thank you, Bharatji. So I still have quite a few, and some are very important historical questions. For example, one child asked, where did the stones were sourced from? Were they local stones or were they brought from somewhere else?
Yeah, so Tamil Nadu has. So here is another thing, reason why I like the Pallavas, right? The Chalukyas and the later kings who built actually had a little more softer stone. We had stones that are characterized as gneiss, as charnockite, as granite. So there is a lot of granite available in Tamil Nadu and in and around, and even to an extent within Andhra. These are all very hard stones. It's very difficult to sculpt and carve them. I didn't show you an image. So the way they used to do the rock cut was they would take the granite, make kind of holes in a straight line across the stone, put wooden wedges into it, and pour water on the wooden wedges. The wood would swell up and the stone would crack. That's how they would cut stone, because there was nothing else to cut stone. They didn't have that kind of implements to cut stone. So that's how they would slice through large boulders to actually get a perfectly straight cut. So I think for Tamil Nadu temples, most of the stones were local. These are not marbles, or these are not stones that we need to get from Jaipur or somewhere in Andhra or somewhere. These are local stones which they used to build the temple. The granite quarry for Brihadishwara temple was supposed to be about 30-35 kilometers away. They are 20 miles away. And I told you the top cupola itself was about 70,000 pounds. So the whole of the structure is probably 180,000-190,000 pounds
Wow.
of granite. So that had to be brought all the way from there, assembled, sculpted. It's a mind-boggling exercise.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I have a lot of questions which children have sent and they're still sending. What I will do, I will collect them and send it to you by email. And
Okay,
maybe we
perfect.
can have a follow-up talk also, because looks like children are very excited and enthusiastic about the topic. Bharatji.
I can get more people also involved. There are people who have done talks about Odisha temples, and Odisha is another amazing state when it comes to temples. A very hidden secret of India. They are very ornate. They have the traditional Nagara structure. Of course, the Odisha have adapted it. It's called the Konark style, or but that's also another interesting talk that can be had.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. So, children, do you have any more question that you have not posted, which is burning question?
Are we gonna have another session like this?
Sure,
See?
I'm very happy to do it.
Okay.
We'll probably go into detail of a kingdom or a style of temple, or one or two, maybe 3-4 specific temples which have all these elements that I spoke about: architecture, art, and so on and so forth. We can definitely explore that.
Okay. Bharatji, any?
Sir, I have one.
Go ahead, Rahul.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I have one question. So, sir, what would you recommend for reading about Indian temples? Like any books or websites?
Okay. So the point is, I don't think we've taken time enough to chronicle our temples, and I think that's where my interest starts, and that's where I'm writing a profitable book along with some. She's writing on the Chalukya temples, both the feuding dynasties and what they built up. There are a lot of very heavy texts that you can find on archive.org. There are no easy textbooks easy books on temples. There are very, very heavy to read, and you need to know so many things to read them. And that's a great pity that we haven't taken the effort to chronicle them properly. In fact, I'll give you an example. There is a Vaikunta Perumal temple in Kanchipuram. if I spoke about Kailasanathar, that's a Shaiva temple. There's a Vaikuntha Perumal temple, almost exactly opposite, which was built by Rajasimha's grandson or great-grandson, Nandivarma Pallava. And that temple in its architecture is probably one of the most complex ones because it is multi-tiered. You have, straight, you go in, there is a sanctum and there is a seated Vishnu. Right above him, there is another sanctum in which Vishnu is lying down. Right above him, there is another sanctum standing up. And above that is an empty chamber. It's almost to show Vishnu going from one stage of his body to another, and finally an empty chamber depicting Atma, or the soul that, for lack of a better word, that is within us. On the walls of the temple, Nandivarma Pallava sculpted the entire history of the Pallavas. Each panel is about a king, his wars, who visited him. There are Chinese looking guys on the walls of the temple because Chinese visitors came to merchants and other people came. So the book that was written to identify which king is being shown in each panel was actually written sometime in 1920 or so by the first woman PhD in India called C. Meenakshi. And nothing else has been written after that. And then finally, a guy called Dennis Hudson, I think from the US, came down, was so fascinated by the temple that he wrote another book. So it is very sad that not much of it is chronicled. But what I will do is, I will send to Sarvesh ji some links, which I have also used to gather information. And you can probably in your free time go through those links. There are some books in archive.org. And also some book recommendations that I'll send to you, which will be easier for you to pick up more details about these temples.
Okay. Thank you, Bharatji.
Thank you.
Bharatji, any final comments, advice, suggestions, or teaching to our students?
So
I
you
have a
should,
question.
go ahead.
So when you say that these temples have been built from the past, right? Like thousands and thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
What about the rocks getting eroded?
What about the
Rocks getting eroded.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to get. Sarvesh, did you get that?
Yeah. He's saying, are they not getting eroded?
Yes, they are. So the Kailasanatha temple is getting eroded fast and very quickly because it is sandstone. It's close to the sea. So, the air is full of salt and moisture. The granite temples survive longer because they're much harder material. So the Brihadishwara temple is not so badly off. But some of the temples in Kanchipuram, because they were built of a more softer stone, sandstone, they're actually eroding quite quickly. In fact, the Vaikuntha Perumal temple that I told you, you can't make out the faces anymore. The faces are just round things in the stone. So yeah, they are. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to preserve it. So the government actually struggles with preserving it. They don't know what to do.
So Bharatji,
They actually end up plastering it.
Yeah.
To kind of create the face again, and that plastered image looks horrendous.
So Bharatji, there is a actually related question that another student, Shriya, is asking. So actually there are two questions. How did these magnificent temples survive the Muslim attacks and destruction in South India? And two, who funds the maintenance and upkeep of these temples today?
Yeah, okay, so the major Muslim attack that happened, and all of the temples that I showed you are actually impacted. Malik Kafur landed up all the way till Madurai and beyond. So he looted these temples through and through and left. But I think his supply lines were so drawn out, he couldn't spend the amount of campaign time he would have liked to spend to actually completely destroy these temples. So if you go to Airavateshwara temple, there are actually tiny Nandis that kind of circumambulate the main temple structure. All of them are beheaded. I have a picture which I didn't put up, but all of them are beheaded. There's very tiny ones, they're all gone. He reached Srirangam. So a lot of the local population did fight him, hold him on long enough. See, at the end of the day, what is the most important thing for us in the temple? It's the main deity at the end of the day. So a lot of these temples, the main deity was actually secreted away somewhere else. And as much as possible, they would remove whatever they needed and kind of go away somewhere and hide. And once the enemy was gone, come back and reinstall the deity, put life back into the deity and bring it up. The interesting story of this is what happened in Kanchipuram. Varadaraja Perumal temple is a very ancient Vishnu temple in Kanchipuram. The current idol is only about 200 years old, 200 or 300 years old, you know. So the original temple idol was actually taken by two priests and put inside the temple tank. And nobody knew that they had actually done it. They installed another deity, they started worshipping. And for some reason, they had to empty the temple tank, and they found Atti Varadar, because he's made of Atti Maram. Atti is basically fig tree in Tamil. So he's made of the wood of the fig tree, the main idol. And they found it. So now they've developed a ritual around it where he's brought out every 40 years for the public to see for about a period of 30 days. And he's put back in and brought back after 40 years. So I managed to go and see it when he was brought out because he was brought out a year back. And I think he's going to come back now in 2059.
Wow.
You know, where I don't know if I'm going to be around. And lakhs of devotees from all over Tamil Nadu and even India came to see him before he was taken back into the temple tank. So yeah, we faced it, but thankfully for us, we resisted as much as possible. And he also was at the last end of his campaign. So fatigue, long supply lines, he couldn't sustain it. He went back, and a lot of our temples survived. But there are damages in every one of our major temples inflicted by him. Later kings did sanctification and rebuilding of a lot of the temple. You should see, recently somebody had posted online the Airavateshwara of 1970s, and it doesn't look like the way it looked when I showed you. So even now they continue reconstructing. The temples in Tamil Nadu are completely government controlled. It's a sad state of affairs because government control automatically make sure that the money that the temple earns is no longer a property of the temple. It's a property of the government. So unless governments are prone to making these temples survive, their festivals continue to operate, so on and so forth, it's a very difficult scenario. But then we also have other problems. We still don't have a mechanism or a formula for taking control of the temple as a society, because a lot of the elements within society are also divided. So it's a very complex scenario right now. I don't think anybody has answers. According to me, the best answer is that the government that comes in is also so pro-Hindu that the temples flourish at a different level. But I don't think that's going to be reality. And I don't know if society will come together to actually provide a unified front and a mechanism to take over the temple. So I don't have an answer, honestly.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said some of the temples aren't like living. Is that because they have no deities in them?
So temples that are okay. So living temples is a very, how to say, a loose term which I've used to depict a temple where the rituals are still followed, the deity is still worshipped. The deity is, depending on the deity, there is a very structured formula for, praying to the deity. In the morning, once you open, there is a first puja done, then there is abhisheka done of the idol. At suitable times, particularly in Vishnu temples, food has to be prepared and offered to the deity. For example, if you go to Puri, Jagannath eats 6 times a day. And he eats 59 dishes in every meal. And the meal is prepared in the kitchens of the temple with the wood of the Rath Yatra. You must have seen Puri Jagannath's Rath Yatra. The Ratha is broken down, and that's the wood used to fire the kitchen for these dishes to be cooked. So there are rituals that are followed, and any temple where the prescribed rituals are followed is a living temple. The deity is still in, it is still alive. It still has the power to grant what you ask the deity. If you go to the shore temple, there's no puja done. The linga has disappeared. One of the lingas is actually broken. So it's a museum piece today.
Thank you, Bharatji.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How can they end up in British museums instead of publicly in India?
Well, they
Does it belong to them?
They ruled us, they took what they want. We don't have a mechanism to bring it back. क्या international politics बात करने लग गए ये लड़के?
So Pratyusha, you should go to Washington DC, go to Smithsonian Museum, and there is a whole floor. So some of the most exquisite Chola brass, Nataraja, and across different dynasties and centuries, artifacts which perhaps even Delhi Museum or other museums in India might not have. That kind of wealth has been
the same with Met Museum. I've started drawing in these Corona times, so I actually found a celestial dancer who's there in Met Museum. It's a beautiful, beautiful dancer. It's from the Gupta period. We don't have any more temples in the Gupta period really surviving. So if you thought what you saw was amazing, then you should see some of the Gupta era sculptures. They're absolutely beautiful, stunning. So all of your museums also have it. It's not just British museums. They're stolen, they're sold, they're auctioned. I've seen auctions happening of our artifacts. Renowned auction houses. What do you say? Who owns them? Who owns the sculpture? The Kohinoor diamond was from the Golconda mines, and it's now in the crown of the Queen. Yeah, we own it, but how do you prove it? There is law. Precedent.
How can we stop this?
Well, I think whatever has to go has left. So not much is going outside anymore.
Maybe we can just become strong.
Yeah, so we have to also recreate. A lot of the skills are still remaining, and we have to make sure that we continue to develop those skills. So I told you, right, Tanjore Tanjavur has artisans who still do bronze work. They do some amazing bronze work, and they still do it. So if you go to Tanjavur, somebody wanted to go to Tanjavur and Kumbakonam, so you can go and see a lot of bronze work being done there. Mahabalipuram has a lot of stone work being done there. So there's still a lot of the skill set available.
I think we can sit down here for whole day, for you whole night, Bharatji, and the topic will never be over. So I think what we should do, smarter thing to do would be we can have a follow-up. Looks like kids are very excited to learn more, and in fact want to, the other aspects they want to explore as well. I still see in the chat. Yeah.
What we can do now is probably collect some themes and see, based on that, have a talk which is more direct towards their questions.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. But thank you very much for staying back so late. It's close to midnight for you, Bharatji, and we really
Thank you
appreciate
very
you
much.
taking time out of your very busy schedule to spend with this
No,
class.
today was Sunday. I was preparing since yesterday and today for what I was going to talk. So I'm glad it went off well and all of you found it interesting. We can have a next session, and please send me the questions. I'll see how best to answer them. Most importantly, I'll send you a list of online resources and also books that you can probably buy to read and learn about these temples.
Yeah, no, thank you, Bharatji. So, class, let us do what we do every time. So let us do the Shanti mantra to end the class. Yeah, so please join your palms together, unmute yourself. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah.
Sarve bhavantu sukhinah.
Sarve Santu Niramaya.
Sarve santu niramaya.
Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu.
Sarve bhadrani pashyantu.
Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhag Bhavet.
Ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Namaste everyone. Bharatji, thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. It was a wonderful time talking to you, and we'll talk again.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Namaste.
काय करायचं क्वेश्चन विचारले लोक